Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Chris Rossini, co-host. Chris, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Great to be with you, Dr. Paul.
Very good. You know, AOC gets in the news a whole lot, and I sort of don't enjoy that. I think, why does the media give them so much time, giving her so much time? And then I get to thinking, well, why do I mention her at all, and why am I going to mention her today? But I guess because she manages to say some pretty dumb things. And today, though, the thing I consider pretty ridiculous is that she says that the conditions are such that to solve some of the problem of homelessness and all these problems and the people who gouge on rentals, we need rent control. But she never even asked the question, where's the worst problems? It's a place where they have rent control, and that's in California. It's hard to believe that countrywide we have more than 550,000 people living in the street. That's not all due to rent control, but in California it has a lot to do with it, and there's a lot of people there. 60% of the housing in San Francisco has some type of controls, by regulations on rent control. And when you control the price, that's what they're doing. Prices are going up for various reasons. There's one, the old-fashioned reason. The Federal Reserve prints too much money, the value of the dollar goes down, you have old-fashioned inflation. Nobody likes the prices to go up, and therefore they complain about it, and they have to do something about it. And traditionally, over many, many years, hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, they even had price controls back in Roman times, because that's their excuse to take the blame off the people who abuse the monetary system, put it on somebody else, put it on the people who are profiteering. And that's why she and others on the far left would say, we have to blame those property owners. Why are they raising the rent so much? Well, it might be because a lot of other prices are going up. But quite frankly, Chris, I think any move in this direction is going in exactly the wrong direction, is just more of what caused the problem, and yet there will not be too many people trying to teach them an economic lesson. But this hope, this doesn't go anywhere. But you could say, well, it already exists. It just means, are they going to keep it, or is it going to go there slightly? But most economists are at the point where, oh yeah, we're not really for rent control, we're not for price controls, but, and then look at what we have here. Officially, they're not endorsing these kind of ideas. This is extremism. But the whole principle of the government getting involved is extremism at its worst. And they've been messing around with this. Just think of the complexity of the housing bubble, how the Federal Reserve was involved in that, and congressional mandates of making bad loans. And finally, this bubble burst, which was very predictable. So there's reasons to explain these problems, and it's not from not having enough regulations. And it's not for not having enough printed money out of the Federal Reserve. And we'd like to sort that out a little bit. Chris, and what are your comments this morning?
Yes, I consider rent controls one of those feel-good laws, like minimum wage and price gouging laws. They make people feel good, but that's about it, because they produce terrible results, especially for the people that it's intended to help. Prices must be left free so that they can tell the truth about supply and demand. And we may not like the truth, I get that, but we need the truth to make the best decisions. You don't want to walk around thinking 2 + 2 = 5. You're going to struggle in life. But when it comes to rent controls, high rents, they scream to developers, build more apartments, there's high profits here, you can make money. And so they'll build more, and it'll drive the prices down of rents. That's what you want. But government cuts that off right at the knees. They prohibit it. So developers will skip. They won't build the apartments because the profits have been taken away. And, the people then have to suffer with high rents and shortages. It's very basic stuff, but you have to look past the headline, the feel-good, understand it.
Boy, that's for sure. And we have to call it price controls, and that's what it is. It isn't a benefit to the poor who can't afford housing. But if you looked at the ultimate consequence of government activity and other things. This is why we're facing this crisis with 550,000 people living in the streets and without a home. But there is a pretty rigid rule on this. When governments come in and they put on price controls, you end up with shortages. Because if you can't replace what you're selling with the price that the government just put on, they're not going to do it. So it's immediate. And I remember this so clearly in 1971 when the gold window was closed, the very next day, because Nixon announced wage and price control. And I always remind the working people who are always saying, well, we have to tax the rich. When the wage and price controls have come over the years, and they've been on and off again in the United States several times now, that it affects the workers too. The workers, of course, have a problem because when you inflate, you devalue their paycheck and they never can keep up. But when the controls come for wage and price control, the price controls goes on to wages too. What impressed me most back in 1971 was how quickly the whole market seized up. It just quit functioning because people couldn't replace what they had in store at the price that the government set. And it was catastrophic, and it played havoc with the markets. It lasted for quite a few years, but eventually they were eliminated. But only indirectly do we have these controls now, because when you look at it, the government's always involved in pricing. Indirectly, house prices are dictated by the government. What about medical care costs? They're dictated, and that's why they're very high. Inflation causes higher prices, and they try to compensate. So there's a lot of different reasons, but we still have wage and price controls to a large degree because of government regulation. There's no real defense, even with most Republicans, no real defense for a free market economy, a real free market economy where property rights are important, where contract rights are important, where monetary policy is key to all this. But then they come along and there's a disequilibrium and a maldistribution of wealth, and it opens up the door to these wild-eyed leftist progressives, and they say, see, it doesn't work, freedom doesn't work, you need us, you need socialism. Used to be they would never say the word socialism because Americans say, we're not socialists. I still hear that, we're reassured, we're not going to be socialists, but we're socialistic, and it's very much involved, and we're moving in that direction, and we know that the progressives really want a one-payer system in medical care. So Obamacare was a disaster, and someone might make it worse. And I would have to say that I think our president would like to move it away from that and give us a little bit more freedom in the marketplace and get away with the government fixing the prices. If you want to look at price fixing that's so detrimental in the medical field is the pricing of medications and drugs. It's outrageous how that system, and that is a result of corporatism, which is not socialism. The corporatism in so many industries, but in particular in medicine, provides benefits to those who sell medical insurance, to the people who manufacture and sell drugs. So the prices are controlled, but they're a little more sophisticated. They don't call it price control, but for some reason it's very, very unfair. And it's to the point now where if you even wanted to get out of the system, let's say you're on Medicare B, and you just get tired of it. Well, I'm going to pay for the drugs that I want myself. Guess what? They're about 10 times higher because they want you in the system. And I sure hope that the regulations that Trump is talking about will help move this back and emphasize the marketplace. That's what we need to get people to understand why rent control is not a solution to homelessness.
Right, Dr. Paul. And I'm sure of all people, Donald Trump understands that rent controls are terrible. And I mentioned how it cuts off developers. They're not going to want to build because the profits have been taken away. And it also harms the owners. Now the owners can't raise the rents, so many of them will maybe convert their apartments into condos and then sell it. So now the owners are taking their apartments off the market. So they're not getting built, and owners are reducing the supply of apartments. And the ones that they have, their incentive to upkeep it and to upgrade it are gone. And then people start calling them slumlords. But they're slumlords because their incentive to upgrade their properties has been removed by the government, by law. So and then you have the tenants. that they know they got a good deal and they're not going to leave. And that's why it's passed down from generation to generation. And getting into a place, even if you're willing to pay a free market price, you can't get in, because the people that are there, they know that they're getting a government subsidized deal and they're not going to get out. So it's a very bad situation. And, it really has to be abolished, but it won't happen until more people understand.
And I see the opposition to our position as something where they want to grab the moral high ground. We would like the moral high ground. I'd like property ownership to be a moral issue and a constitutional issue. I would like to have control of the moral high ground, saying that freedom is much better than slavery and authoritarianism and socialism and all these things that we disapprove of. But I think that the other side, to get the moral high ground, it's all based on emotions. Get people to hate and despise those rich people. If we just can tax the rich people, everything is going to be all right. And quite frankly, you get rid of the rich people, you get rid of a lot of poor people too. You destroy their lives too, because rich people usually get rich imperfectly at times because they use the government. But they get rich because they have to supply jobs and products to the poor people. Yes, it's never perfect, but that's the way it works. So when you get rid of all the rich people, you're going to destroy a lot of poor people, and there's going to be a lot more homelessness. But I think the other thing for grabbing the moral high ground, they use hypocrisy. They're hypocrites to no end, and that seems to be appealing because it's falseness. It's not true, but it's easy to sell, free medicine, free care, free stuff, and there seems to be a fair amount of acceptance for that. I think the other thing that they use, and they won't admit this, is total ignorance of just common sense and how economics work. If you tell them that if you have price fixing, it'll lead to shortages. Oh, what do you mean? They wouldn't argue, and they'd give you some other argument, and they wouldn't accept this. But the one thing I do give a few of them a little concession is that there's a lot. There are those that are well-intentioned. I think that a lot of people I met in Washington, I thought they fit this category I just described, but a lot of them were well-intentioned, believing, well, this is the best we can do. This is the right thing we do. We have to have more equity and freedom. But they don't think of equal justice as being what's so valuable in a society and private property ownership and having incentives. They don't look at it that way. They look at it as long as you're well-intentioned, it'll be okay and it'll work out. And if a problem crops up, we'll just do it over again, write another regulation. And Mises, the great Austrian economist, said, if you write a regulations, just remember there will be at least 2 new ones to try to correct the problems you just created. And this is what we're talking about right now, is what regulations. Now, these so-called well-intentioned people, and they want to do good, some of them, is trying to fix the bad regulations, the bad things government has done. My suggestion is, why don't you get rid of the bad regulation? Why don't you say, if the Federal Reserve's inflation is the problem, which it is, that causes, the maldistribution of wealth, it causes all the artificial prices, well, why don't we eliminate the cause? That's one of the reasons why we suggest very strongly that we ought to get rid of the Federal Reserve and maybe return to and get the people to understand how a free market works.
Right, Dr. Paul. I'll finish by saying socialists, whether they're good intentioned or not, they exploit people. And it's ironic because they call capitalists exploiters. But socialists are exploiting ignorance. What we've talked about today, these are very simple concepts. You just have to look past the headline that you're given and think one, maybe 2 steps ahead, and you realize, whoa, this is a very bad idea. But socialists do not want you to think that far ahead, and you're not going to get any help from government schools, government media, government itself. You're not supposed to think. You're supposed to feel, and when they tell you they're doing a good thing, because, they're very different than us, people that want power. They're not like us. They want to feel needed. They want to feel wanted. They want to feel like they can direct society because they're so much better than us. It's all nonsense, but they're going to get away with it as long as people don't understand themselves. The bad results will just pile up and people will keep running. Please help me, Mr. Politician, until you just can't take it anymore. And at that point, we hope that more and more people will understand the virtues of liberty so that we can go in the right direction.
Very good. And I don't believe that Cortez is going to get her bill passed and make it a national issue on these rent controls. I think it's still dangerous for those ideas to be floating. It should be easily accepted in this country. In the old days, we used to believe that some of these things were to be dealt with at the state level, which is not adhered to. But I don't think she's going to get this package passed. I think there is a fair amount of resistance to it. But I'd like to see the impure thinking that has given us these problems, because just the status quo is not all that good, because this will gradually get worse instead of overwhelmingly getting worse by passing a bill like she has. So this is something that people ought to understand, that yes, there is something we can do, and that is, if we're having a problem with homelessness, figure out why. I don't think it's that complex. You know, in the old days, the homelessness was dealt with in a much different way, and it wasn't dealt by the federal government coming in and building houses and making things worse. But one thing is that they propose make these proposals, which seem to be quite preposterous, but they're out there, like the new Green Deal. I mean, that is radical stuff, and this global warming and all this mystical things going on. And it's like a religion, because you're castigated if you even want to have an open discussion. Science has settled it. Well, someday study about all the things that have been settled in science, in medicine, and find out that there have been many, many mistakes made. Science doesn't settle it. It helps us learn, but it helps us to learn how to ask the next question. So this whole thing about the Green New Deal, I don't think they're going to get it, because it's just too hard for me to believe that we've gone that far. But it's bad that it's floating around out there, softening in the market, and as things get bad, and who knows what will happen. But it also serves their interest in pursuing impeachment, because if everybody dwells on the impeachment, we really don't have to think seriously about a problem. We don't have to pay any attention to the wasteful spending overseas. We don't have to pay any attention to the 170 countries that we're in and all the hot spots around the world, the trillions of dollars that we're spending in the military budget, not the defense budget. See, this is all a distraction, and I think it's done to try to pump up the people and say things are bad and it's all the president's fault. We have to hate the president, and if we could only get rid of him, things will be all right. But there's a lot of other people that strongly disagree with that. And I think that the goal that we have at the Liberty Report is try to get people to think about what is the position that you must hold to solve these problems. And I think the word non-intervention is the greatest point to make. Not just non-intervention in foreign policy, non-intervention just in economic policy, let you spend your money the way you want and let the free market work, but also non-intervention in the lives of individuals. Most people accept this. If you describe what this means, people say, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. I think it's my money. I should be able to spend it. Yeah, I think we're overseas way too much. No, I don't think the government should be telling me what church I should go to or what kind of a speech I should have if I'm politically incorrect, that I get punished. People don't believe that, but they're too tolerant of this and too patient, because we have to answer to that and show them that a free society based on non-intervention and promoting individual liberty will solve a lot of our problems. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Come back soon.